This video consists only of the speech that was given to us as we sat at the view that you see on the screen. This is Secret Mountain. This is a photograph I took sitting in the chair as the sun went down. Melinda Leslie is about to give us a 90-minute talk before we put on our goggles. So this video only consists of what Melinda said, and I found it very interesting. Mama Knows was able to think ahead enough to record the whole thing, and I believe it's worth listening to before I put out the UFO videos. Here is what ChatGPT says about the woman you're about to listen to. Important note, in this video, she does not talk about her own alien abduction experiences. Although we did have one very cranky, angry woman who paid to be on the tour, I would say everyone who was there that night experienced some very interesting and unusual sights that we will never forget, including everyone in the angry woman's group. You will hear her from time to time. And she did kind of ruin my night, to be honest. Got me pretty cranky.
The woman who gives UFO tours in Sedona, Arizona, from the Center for the New Age is Melinda Leslie. She is a well-known UFO researcher and investigator with over 35 years of experience in ufology. Melinda is the director of UFO sighting tour at the Center for the New Age, where she conducts nighttime UFO tours using military-grade Generation 3 night vision goggles. These tours, which often take place at a UFO hotspot that is also a vortex location, are highly rated by visitors, with many describing them as a highlight of their Sedona experience. She is also a UFO abductee who shares her personal extraterrestrial contact experiences during the tours, adding a unique perspective.
Behind me is Thunder Mountain. When you're driving through town on 89A, that big domed hill that you can't help but miss, it's the biggest thing, is Thunder Mountain. When you're driving on 89A, to the right of Thunder Mountain are like 4 giant turrets. The last of the big turrets is called Coffee Pot Rock because it looks just like an old-fashioned percolator coffee pot. You know, with a little spout and top and handle. Okay. But that's Coffee Pot Rock. That's why we have Coffee Pot Drive, Coffee Pot Restaurant, because of Coffee Pot Rock. And then when you're looking at Thunder Mountain to the left of it, there's a little spire by itself. That's called Chimney Rock. Well, we just came around the back, so we're now on the back side of Thunder Mountain. And Chimney Rock is right over there. You driving in, you may have noticed it. We drove right past it. And Coffee Pot Rock is down around the bend here. You have to go quite a ways to see it.
I am redacting 44 seconds right here to protect her location in case another UFO tour company listens to this audio.
The hills we're facing right here in front of us is called Secret Mountain Wilderness. To the left of these, let me start with Secret Mountain Wilderness, which is immediately in front of us, like right behind this sign. This is all Secret Mountain Wilderness. This is layers of mountains. We're pretty sure the tops of them are about 6,000 feet in altitude, maybe a little bit higher even. And the closest mountainsides to right where we're sitting, what we're looking at right now, is mile and a half from where we're sitting. Some of them 2 miles. And then behind those are more mountains, like 4 miles. And of course, the back of those slope. So anything we see coming, and you guys will ask this so everyone grasps what I'm saying, because it'll save you asking this later. Although that's all right. You can ask it as many times as you need to. I'm used to repeating things every night. I'm used to it. But the back side of those is at least 4 miles away. So anything coming and going from the canyons on the other side of that, which we will see later, is probably at least 4, if not 5 miles away, and maybe up to about 10 miles away. So people say, how far away are these things coming and going? If they're coming and going from behind the hills, they're probably 5 to 10 miles away behind the mountains. If they're coming and going from the canyon back there, which I'll get more into in a little bit. Secret Canyon Trail goes back behind some of these mountains right here and goes back about 3 miles, maybe a little bit less, and then ends. And then the end of Secret Canyon Trail well, it ends, and then so the hiking ability ends, and then it's like giant boulders and pine forest, and you can't really go further unless you're like rock climbing. There's steep canyon walls and boulders and whatnot. Some people have gone further, but you're climbing over giant boulders and stuff. You're way off trail at that point. But it goes back a couple miles and ends. But the canyon continues back, and they're like box canyons. That back end of Secret Canyon butts up against Secret Mountain. Now, right here in front of us, this one to the left with a little saddle, little dip on top, that's Bear Mountain. And the kind of looks like a flat part to the left. It's not really flat, it's just the way it's silhouetted right now. It looks like it is. But that part and that part with that little dip, those are both all part of Bear Mountain. Behind Bear Mountain is Secret Mountain, whole separate mountain behind it, Secret Mountain. And where you see that deep V right there, okay, part of what you're seeing with that V is part of Secret Mountain, because you're actually seeing Bear Mountain in front and Secret Mountain kind of behind it. So part of that is Secret Mountain, when you're seeing right there. But otherwise, everything to the left of that, other than that little bit, is Bear Mountain. Secret Canyon butts up against Secret Mountain. That's kind of like the end of the box canyon, okay? In front of these hills here are very popular hiking destinations and other box canyons, like you have Long Canyon. So you have Secret Canyon, Long Canyon, Boynton Canyon, which is one of the top 4 vortex locations. So if you're doing the vortexes, if you're doing the top 4, you're probably doing Boynton Canyon, and then you have Fay Canyon, and then around the bend there's Loy Canyon, and then Sycamore Canyon beyond. But just so you know, because this will all matter later as I get more into stuff, that the Secret Canyon trails go back a ways and then end. Secret Canyon Trail, not trails, trail ends, and then it kind of branches off, but you're off trail and it's like boulders and pine forest. And then there's nothing else for a couple miles. There's nothing back there. There's no structures, there's no roads, there's no trails, no dirt roads, nothing. It's just wild, rugged, mountainous terrain. Okay. Then, Sycamore Canyon you get to by going down 89A, down into Cottonwood, and then you branch off into a little town of Clarkdale. And then from Clarkdale, there's a long, windy road out of Clarkdale to get to the trailhead for Sycamore Canyon. And eventually that ends and becomes a long, windy dirt road. And then you're at the trailhead for Sycamore Canyon. Sycamore Canyon, but beyond these mountains that we're seeing right here, there's some more mountains kind of heading to the west or towards the moon.
I am redacting the argument that the lady who's eating chips and drinking beer decided to ensue with this woman who's trying to give the rest of us a tour.
Anyways, long story short on that. Okay, so and so it's worked out really, really well since. Now, the stuff that we're seeing peak later changes up locations, or at least in the last year and a half, it's been changing up a little bit. And so if it suddenly starts happening more in another area, of course, the other thing is the earliest this peak stuff has happened, this new stuff for the last year and a half, I'll explain about all that in just a minute. But the earliest it's happened is 8:30 as far as the peak, hour of stuff peaked right at 8:30. The latest it's peaked is 2 a.m. So, but back there's nothing. So you take a couple miles of the back end of Secret Canyon, and there's nothing. There's no roads. There's no dirt roads. There's no trails. There's no structures or buildings. And same with the back. So it's a couple miles, like let's say, 2 miles or 3 miles at the end of here, and then the back end of Sycamore Canyon, another 5 miles. Well, you have 7 or 8 miles between my hands here of canyons behind these rock formations where there's no roads, no dirt roads, no trails, no structures. It's all very rugged, wild mountainous terrain. Some of it's thick pine forest and steep canyon walls and that kind of stuff. And the closest civilization is from where we're sitting is 21 miles straight back. You have the 40 freeway. Flagstaff is over here. That's to the north. And then in a couple hours outside Flagstaff, you have Williams. Right in the middle between Flagstaff and Williams, if you've driven that section of 40, you go through a little town called Belmont. Belmont is like a little postage stamp of a town. It basically consists of, if you're driven the 40, you'll see there's a McDonald's right there. So that's how most people know. There's a McDonald's, there's a truck stop, and I think like a Days Inn, and that's it. And that's like 21 miles straight back. So if you think about, there's roughly 8 by 20 miles of absolutely nothing but rugged mountainous terrain. Now, that's a lot of pre-talk to get into the next story. A year and a half ago, I'd been doing the tours already at that point for 13 years, and all of a sudden, everything changed. All the stuff that we'd always been seeing for years was still happening, but all of a sudden, this new stuff started happening. Now, I will also give a little backstory just for a minute that I will cut. Now, every time tonight I say, I will get to that, I'll cover that. It's because I have it planned in the hour and a half talk to say, including everything I've already said, in an hour and a half to say, but I don't want to constantly repeat myself. So I'll keep saying, I'll get more to that later, or I'll cover that. Just know it's planned, and I do it in a certain order, so I'm not constantly repeating myself. It took me a year and a half it took me the first year of constantly doing it wrong to finally go, okay, I got to do this in a way I don't repeat myself. Okay. And anytime I say sightings tonight, I mean UFOs. If I'm talking about planes, I will say planes. If I'm talking about helicopters, I will say helicopters. If I'm talking about drones, I'll say drones, and satellites, I'll say satellites. But every time I say sightings, I mean UFOs. Okay. Because that's another thing that happened this year. I realized people are really confused what I meant by sightings. You already said something tonight, like, do you mean the military? If I'm saying sightings, I'm talking about UFOs. If otherwise, I'll say helicopters, planes, etc. Okay. And so I've just, I've just learned to say all this to make it as clear as I possibly can. So September 27th, 2023, I had people meet me at the center, regular tour planned, explained everything there like I do. We came out to the cultural park location, and I said, I said, I'll do all my talk, and I cover in my talk all about how do you know if it's planes, helicopters, drones, satellites. I cover all that. And then if it's planes or helicopters or everything flown and built by mankind, how to know if it's private aircraft, commercial aircraft, or military aircraft. And I cover that in depth. And I did that night. Now, I will say this. Normally, in the previous 13 years, ever since 9/11 and the Patriot Act, the military patrol all cities and towns by sky. There'll be a patrol usually of 2 planes, usually either F-16s or F-18s, come out and do a sweep. They're usually in near vicinity to each other. And I've had a lot of military experts come out and point this out to me. And military pilots, current and ex-military fighter jet pilots and helicopter pilots, etc. And it used to be that we would see at about 50,000 feet or well over 40,000 feet, these military jets patrolling. And we will see that tonight. And they will have a distinct blink pattern. I will get into that. But it used to be for the first 13 years, we wouldn't see military helicopters out here much at night. Maybe we would see a military helicopter 1 in 20 tours at the most. And if we saw 2 in a night, that would be pretty rare. And I could say we did, but again, it was rare. At best, 1 in 20 tours, probably less than that. Now, military helicopters are more common in the area during the day because they refuel at our airport. So to see them coming in and land at our airport, Blackhawks and Apaches, and occasional Cobras, but mostly Apaches and Blackhawks. Apaches and Cobras are gray, but the Blackhawks are black. Okay. And they'll land at our airport and fuel, very obviously. I live near the airport. I'm constantly used to see, right, guys? You guys live here,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm constantly used to seeing them fly over me. But at night, it's more rare. Again, on my tours, maybe 1 in 20 tours. So going back to September 27th, I did my talk. I covered all about planes and helicopters. We were seeing military aircraft at the usual altitude, with jets. And so as the evening progressed, my clients were well versed in seeing that. Now, I had two families and a couple. The two families said, we've seen you online. We follow you. They listed different documentaries or TV shows and radio interviews or podcasts or combination thereof. Each one brought up different stuff. But both of them said they weren't related to each other at all. But both of them said, because we know this about you and we've seen you in this stuff, we want to ask you about your own personal experiences. I said, okay. And they said, we have some questions. I said, okay. Well, I said, back then, you guys might remember this, I would say we will have the most sightings in the first hour. The second hour will taper off with less and less sightings. And they said, in the first hour, so I said, wait till the second hour when it tapers off. And there's a very logical reason, which I will get more into, again, so I don't repeat myself. But I'll say this much right now. It's about the angle of sunlight coming over the horizon, lighting stuff up in the upper atmosphere. That you're seeing metallic stuff reflect sunlight. And because of that angle of sunlight, you would see the most stuff in the first hour, and the second hour would taper off. Very logical. And so I told them back then, that time of year, whatever time of year it is, you're basically going to meet me for the tour an hour before it gets dark. Now, that's always preset in the computer booking system at work. When I say work, I mean the Center for New Age. And so in September, it just happened to be that the first hour of viewing, after talking and everything, would have been roughly 7 to 8. And the second hour of viewing would have been basically 8 to 9. So the center was telling my clients, I should say, and I was telling my clients that the tour was going to be over at about 9 or about 9:15. And that was true. Well, now I'm saying like 11:15. But that at that time, that was the case. And I explained to them how you'll have the most signs in the first hour and the second hour of the taper off. So they said, well, we have questions. I said, wait till it tapers off. So finally at about 8:30, they said, can we ask you questions now? It's slowed down. We maybe only after 8 it had 1 or 2 sightings, and we had like 30 or 40 in the first hour. Okay, so they were like, is now a good time to ask? I said, sure. And so I started storytelling. It takes a while. They were asking me all sorts of stuff. They knew enough to about particular things I had talked about in some interviews, and so it took a little while. And so suddenly we blow well past 9 and into past 9:30. And the couple said, we're staying with friends of ours here in town. They're texting us. We got to go. We said we'd be done closer to 9, and it's like 9:40. We got to go. So they took off. And then, but the two families stayed and said, can we talk longer? I said, sure. And one of the guys was looking toward, now again, we're at Culture Park, but we're facing these same hills. So we're only, mile and a half over there. And they go, and this one guy's looking towards the hills, and he goes, Melinda, I'm seeing a lot of military aircraft. Now, back in September of 2023, we weren't absolutely certain if it was jets or helicopters. Now, a year and a half later, and taking out a lot of military pilots, including military helicopter pilots, I know now that it's military helicopters, the majority of the stuff over the hills. And so just for the sake of telling the story, he goes, I see a bunch of this. And I go, really? He goes, is this normal? So I turn my goggles back on. My clients do. We're looking towards the hills. And I go, oh, hell no. Now, does anyone mind? That's what I said that night. I had adults and teenagers with me. Anyone mind that I say hell no?
No.
Okay. So
Hell no.
Encourage it.
Oh, you encourage it. Very good. We're going to get along just fine.
I'd be down for a couple F-bombs.
Okay. Well, when I have kids present, I clean it up. How old are you, my dear?
12.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
You're petite for 18, which is good. May you always look younger than your age. Good for you. Okay. It's a bummer until you're like 25, and then you don't mind. People think you're young. Okay. And then when you're like 40, you're like, yes, people think I'm 10 years younger. Woo! I used to get that till I hit like 45, and then it started to catch up with me. Then I passed 50, and it stopped happening. I'm like, damn it. Damn it. At least they don't guess me older, thank God. Not just
So
lucky.
wait, what happened with this tour?
I'm going back to it. Hang
Okay.
on. I
All
got
right.
sidetracked
Sorry,
for a
I
minute.
was very into the story.
Yeah, I'm getting back to it. I just got
Don't let
goofy
me
for a
hang
minute.
here.
I'm having fun. I got to entertain myself, right? Okay. So he's looking and he goes, Melinda, I'm seeing a ton of military. Is this normal? And I said, oh, hell no. And I go, no. And they go, you've not seen all this military over these hills and canyons, over these mountains? And I go, no, never. I said, this is really weird. And I said, normally we, like I'd already said, we don't see military helicopters. This is really weird. Even that night, I was pretty sure it was helicopters. Now I know for certain because they were like hovering, going back and forth, not flying like jets, but now I know for sure. And I go, this is really, really weird. And then since about 8:30, and now it's past 9:30, the sightings had stopped. We'd maybe seen one thing, two at the most, as far as UFOs during that time. And all of a sudden, one lady is looking up, and she's looking at the goggles. She goes, Melinda, there's a bunch of things up there moving around again, like even more than before. Is it normal to have the sightings stop and an hour later have a whole nother wave of sightings? And I said, oh, hell no. Like, we'd never seen this. And she goes, well, I'm seeing a bunch more stuff. And I said, yeah, we started having sightings, lots of them. And they go, this is even like more than before. I go, I know, this is really weird. And they said, you've never seen us. And they were even like, well, maybe you've never stayed out this late. And I said, oh, no. I said, about 1 in 4 tours, at least. That's being conservative. I'm out late with clients because they ask me stuff and they start telling their personal stories. And, so I said, even when it was ending at 9, to be out till 10:30 was not that unusual. I said, it didn't happen every night because I usually tried to end for my clients. But it, 1 in 4 tours, I would be out late. And I said, no. I said, in 13 years, I'd never seen it stop. And then have a whole new wave of stuff. An hour later, it's out of the blue. What? I'm sorry, what?
I don't know. There was a weird, like a hummingbird or something. It was like a. Did you hear that also?
It was a bug.
Oh, it was that. Sorry, it was like loud. It was like.
Oh, that's okay.
I thought
I
something
didn't
was
hear it,
really
but
going to take a.
we're in
big
nature.
bite
We get all sorts of animals and stuff. Don't be that surprised. I mean, this is all rugged stuff around us. We're in the forest here, so we get lots around us. Last night I was in a parking lot in town. I was in the Safeway lot, and I was there working on something in my car, and it had gotten quite late. I was out with my clients till after 11, and I forget why I pulled in there. I think someone was calling me or something, so I pulled in to grab the call. And I even saw McDonald's, which is now open till at least 11 closed and stuff, And it was like 11:30, maybe even midnight. I'm still sitting there in my car. And all of a sudden, and my windows were down because there was a beautiful breeze out. And I said, that's lovely. I'll have my windows down. And all of a sudden, I heard grunting and stuff around my car that I thought was people. And I was on my phone doing stuff. And finally, I said, who's around my car? My windows are down. Maybe I should put them up and make sure my doors are locked. I mean, this is a safe town, but I was still like, what? I'm in the parking lot all by myself. What had gathered around my cars was about 10 javelina.
Oh.
And they were like, I think they could tell that like my windows were down and they're like, rah, rah, like, got any food? They're like, rah, 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 And I started to roll up my windows like, oh my God. And I go, Melinda, you're in your car. First off, javelina aren't aggressive unless you're feeding them, so don't feed them. And they're very protective of the babies. So if they've got young babies around, give them a wide berth. But these were all a bunch of males, big ones, And so I started to open my windows. I said, Melinda, don't be silly. And I said, you guys, I'm sorry I don't have any food. And they're like, rah, 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 and they're walking all around my car. And then eventually they walked off. I thought, that was so funny. My car was surrounded by like 10 big javelina. They were looking for a handout. But I'm like, sorry, you guys, I don't have anything. Okay. It was very funny. Anyways, so going back to the story, I get sidetracked. So then we're having sightings, and they said, have you ever seen this light? I said, of course not. Hell no. And then one lady started to notice, and we all started to notice that we were seeing things come down and go behind these hills, and things come up behind the hills, and great big amber lights. I'll get more into that in a little bit. That's very specific. But we're seeing them come up.
So it needs to be close time.
And they go, have you ever seen these? One lady in particular goes, have you ever seen stuff come and go from behind these mountains before? And I went, oh, hell no. In 13 years, we had never seen that. And then she goes, or somebody else said, what's behind those hills? Well, I said there were 2 answers to that. One's a very simple answer, and the other's very complex. The simple answer is, what am I seeing lit up? Is that your phone on or something giving off light?
Yeah.
Because when the goggles are on, we shouldn't have that. It's fine now. The goggles are on. But once they're on, these increase that light, and it would create glare for all of us. Okay. and if you were holding the goggles and you were looking right at that, it could damage them. So no bright lights when the goggles are on. No flash photography, no flashlights when the goggles are on. They're not on yet, so it's okay. But I just was wondering what it even was. And if it's your phone, you're about to have it go dead. But you don't want it lit up all the time. Okay, so going back to, and they said, have you ever seen stuff coming and going? I said, no, behind hills. And they said, well, what's back there? I said, there's a simple answer complex. The simple answer is absolutely nothing. And I explained what I already said about the trails ending and there being miles there and 5 miles over there of nothing, no structures, no roads, nothing. And I said, there's nothing there. I said, there's wild, rugged, mountainous terrain, and there's no reason for the military to be hovering over that area. Someone just texted me in case any of you happen to look this up, and I just got this today. A client who went out with me a couple weeks ago said, oh, well, we've learned all about Camp Navajo, a relative of ours, so they were stationed out there, and that they have military training and flight training out at Camp Navajo, which is outside of, and I got to now respond to this person. Our research team's done extensive work about Camp Navajo. Yes, it's outside of Belmont. It's between Belmont and Williams. It's more outside of Williams, really. And to let them know, well, no, I take that back. It is closer to Belmont. But to let them know, it's now just a weapons storage area and a training facility, but there's no military aircraft there. And that our team's done extensive work. In fact, there's been no military aircraft stationed there for at least 15 years, and I think longer than that. Unless something has recently changed up. And she's like, well, we know someone who was in the military and they were stationed out there, years ago. But for at least 15 years, there's been no military aircraft. And the closest, and she said, well, you said there was no, she said in this email, you said there was no military installation anywhere near except for outside of Phoenix, Luke Air Force Base. And so she misunderstood me, so I'll clarify right now. The only place with any military aircraft, helicopters, or military jets stationed at it. The closest one, there's ones further away, the closest one is Luke Air Force Base right outside of Phoenix. So we're seeing a ton of military aircraft out here. That's 2 hours away as the crow flies. They're coming up from Phoenix. Unless they're coming up from an entrance with the underground base, which I can't rule out. Especially helicopters, because I've taken out a lot of military pilots and military helicopter experts, and they inform me that these helicopters are spending over $3,000 a minute to fly in fuel alone, not even including manpower or anything else, just fuel alone, $3,000 a minute. So if they had to fly all the way up from Phoenix, that seems like a huge waste of fuel, doesn't it? Now, Camp Navajo, many, many years ago, had some helicopters stationed at it, but it hasn't had those in whatever, well, it's got to be more than 15 years now. It's got to be, 18 years maybe, since they were stationed there. So now I got to get back to her and go, I'm aware of that, but they haven't had that station there in 15 years, and that I'm part of an investigation team, and my team members have looked into this extensively, And I may look up before I reply to her and send her a link, but just so you guys know. That's all right. I try to be really accurate and try to make sure I'm accurate on what I'm saying. So going back to, so again, there's nothing back there, and there's no reason for the helicopters to be hovering and swarming out there, and we will see that. Now I know, in fact, I found out end of last year and into this year, that these helicopters are flying in night vision mode. I've taken out, I had a lady who had been a captain training units in the Middle East how to fly in night vision mode, because she said, I was the captain in charge of these units taking in supplies to the troops in the Middle East, and we had to be flying under radar, and we had to fly in night vision mode, and blah, 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 blah. And she talked about these helicopters we're seeing. She was telling me all the reasons she knew this, that they have reduced lighting inside and outside. And then she said, which means they're flying on their helmets, they have night vision goggles. And she said, not quite all, but 3/4 of the helicopters you're seeing swarming out over these hills and in the area are flying in night vision mode. Now, that was in November. She told me that last November. And now I've had more people this year who are experts in this bring it up and talk about it. And so, based upon what do I know, I'm not an expert, but I take out people who are. And when they get into the in depth, I go, okay, you know. And then she sent me photos of her old units and the equipment on the helicopters and what they look like up close when flying in night vision. She sent me all this specs and stuff, so I'd be well informed. But so when you see these helicopters, why right now you're not seeing a ton? Now occasionally you might see a blinking light over there, and then you're going to be seeing the helicopter. Look, there's one up there that's blinking. So occasionally you will. But when you look at the night vision, and particularly as it gets later, like last night at like 10:30, they started swarming in. And so we'll see if that happens again tonight. There's one over there, military. That's military as well. And then I just saw one out over this way. But when you look with these, you'll see a bunch more. Well, that's because, and even that night she was explaining all that last November, one of my clients said, well, how are we seeing all of them? And she held up her and her husband's, goggles and said, because you're using these. Like, this is, you're seeing them.
How do you tell the difference between?
Closer to each other?
Yeah, all the triple blinks, those are military, yeah. And I'll get more into that. Okay. And anyways, because I have a whole section.
And planes are just one blink?
I'll get more into it. Don't worry about it. I'll get more into it, so it'll be real clear. Okay, so that's part of my set deal. Okay, so anyway, so going back to, September 27, 2023, I said, no, we've never seen him come and go by in the hills. The easy answer was there's nothing back there. The complicated answer is we have a deep underground military base. And now I've been telling people for the last year and a half, I'm part of a team of people investigating it. And one of those guys has been doing it for 40 years, Tom Dongo. And Jeremiah and Alexandra Caldwell, and myself, and Jeremiah Hortzman, I should say, and Alexandra Caldwell,
I saw it.
That I think was a shooting star.
I saw one a
Unless it
minute
was
ago.
one
this
going
way?
really fast.
And there's a meteor shower that's supposed to peak in a day or two.
Okay,
So
so with the goggles, if you see a streak or a tail, I will cover this more, but if you see a streak or a tail, it's a shooting star. Without the goggles, it's hard to say for certain. But because it was literally going sideways, it may have been a fast unknown. But without the goggles and being able to see if it had a streak or tail, so we'll put that in the, we're not certain, And we are seeing, last night we saw a lot of shooting stars. So that explains why we're leading up to a major. When is the meteor shower? Do we know?
the 29th.
Oh,
And it's actually
that's tomorrow.
two
Yeah.
meteor showers that converge in the same day.
Is it supposed to peak then at like between
I
1 and
didn't
3 this morning?
get the time, just that
They
it's the
usually
29th.
peak in the early morning.
I
And the
agree.
reason is that's when it's darkest and you see them the best because you're fully in the umbra of Earth's shadow, the thicker part of Earth's shadow, where there's no scattering of light in the sky, so you see more. And so they usually are peaking at that time. Yeah. So if it's supposed to be the 29th, well, today's the 28th, so that would mean in the morning. Or either early this next morning or the next 24 hours after that. But that explains why last night we saw so many shooting stars. I thought there's a meteor shower coming up. Is it the Leonids? Oh, the Perseids. Okay.
And I don't know what the second one is, but
Because there's the
Perseids.
Perseids and then
Yeah.
the Leonids, usually. Leonids come out of Leo and the Perseids come out of Perseus constellation. Okay, so and then you have the Orionids, which come out of Orion, but that's in the fall, if I remember correctly. I have to check that. I used to know these things. I should know because of the tour. Look how bright, you guys. There's no clouds in the sky. That's all the Milky Way.
Mm-hmm.
Just stunning tonight with the goggles. It's really
I mean, I've been seeing so many interesting things already over here with darker.
Yeah, we're going to see more. I mean, for sure. There's another helicopter over there. Now this, I was trying to see if it's a single or actually a double blink. I think it's a double, so it could still be small military. But that's a plane or jet, not one of the helicopters. But down lower, I've been seeing some of the helicopters. But again, with these, you'll see a ton of them. Okay, going back to, so I covered. So you guys, we have tremendous evidence for the underground base. We've had, okay, 2 different TV shows have done extensive ground penetrating radar out near the Bradshaw Ranch area, which is from where we're seeing. Any of you here familiar with Bradshaw Ranch?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's from where we're sitting. It's like 5 or 6 miles right out over here, kind of below where the moon is, but that direction, maybe a little bit more to the right of that, 5 or 6 miles. In fact, yeah, it would be back behind here more. Anyways, long story short. In the surrounding area around there, they did 2 different television shows have done ground penetrating radar to come up with 2 separate sections, a 50-foot wide tunnel going for thousands of feet under that area. As far as they scanned. In other words, they know that the tunnel's extended beyond that, but for the distance that they scan, and when you overlay one of those sections that they showed, I did a freeze frame on TV, overlaid it on Google Earth to say if you extended the line. And they did on the show. They speculated on it going further and where it went. And I said, well, I want to know more precisely. So I took exactly their scan of what they had, overlaid it on Google Earth of the 50-foot wide line, and just continued it perfectly straight. And on one end, it goes right back to the back end of Sycamore and Secret Canyons, where we know are 2 of the launch sites. In fact, whistleblowers have come forward, insiders and people who have hiked off trail back in those areas. In both locations say that there is a platform elevators, which they're called corkscrew lift or platform elevators, the same kind of elevators that they have on aircraft carriers that bring up the planes from under deck to the surface, and they have big corkscrew lifts on them, and that there is one bringing up aircraft and other things in the back end of Secret Canyon, where that has been witnessed by more than one person, and in the back end, so Secret Canyon and the back end of Sycamore Canyon, a couple miles away from each other, but they've been witnessed in both areas, and we have good accounts from insiders and witnesses, so we think it adds up to say those are both there. We think there's very likely to be one similar one in an area called Government Canyon. You guys, when you look on Google Earth, Secret Canyon, Sycamore Canyon, and Government Canyons are their real names. You guys, when you hide a big underground military base in a place called Secret Canyon, Secret Mountain, and Government Canyon, that's called hiding in plain sight. Somebody had a sense of humor. Those are their real names. I've been meaning to check with the county. Some of these days I will. I'll go to the county recorder or something, try to find out if I can get information on when those canyons were officially named. We have Freedom of Information Act documentation, FOIA documentation, long story short, saying that in 1974 they were going to build an underground installation over 5,000 feet in depth as part of one of the nuclear regulatory agencies at that time. But we have ranchers in the area and in the entrance of Sycamore Canyon, the surrounding area, saying, going back before the 70s, we think it's like 50s and 60s, that they were seeing tunnel boring equipment, large, huge tunnel boring pieces on flatbed trucks and military convoys going back into those canyons before then. So we have that evidence suggesting it went back before 74, but we have Freedom of Information Act documentation that they were going to do an underground installation in 74, which might have been just a new part or an add-on to existing stuff. And then we have the entrances that we're fairly certain are there back in Government Canyon, as well as Secret Canyon and Sycamore Canyon, but also out in the Drake-Paulden area, which is about, from where we're seeing, it's about 18 miles out that way. And in the Ash Fork area, we have reason to believe that there may be launch sites out there as well. And so we feel that there might be like 4 I mean, we have evidence suggesting 4 different launch sites. But right here, we're in direct alignment. I mean, we're just within miles of the back end of Secret Canyon and Sycamore Canyon right there. Okay. And then people we've interviewed, I was going to say hundreds, maybe not that many, but probably the different team members and I adding it together, we might have 50 to 100 people that we've interviewed that have had run-ins with the guards. They've been stopped, including my team members, well, including me and a friend once in the 90s, not on a trip here, not knowing the significance of it, but we were stopped by guards. And then I've had team members who've had it happen a couple of times. And you can be out hiking in these canyons, and you can even be in canyons where hundreds, if not thousands of people go every day, Long Canyon, Boynton Canyon, Lloyd Canyon, and you can get stopped by guys all in military camouflage, combat boots, Kevlar vests, M16s over their shoulder. One story I heard not long ago, a guy who, apparently this happened to him like a year ago, but a guy who is a server somewhere in town, I think he's a bartender, he works an earlier shift. He got off work. He likes to hike Long Canyon, which is directly in front of us. It's literally, I'm pointing at it right in front of me. And he was hiking in Long Canyon, and he wasn't that far from the car. My understanding was like less than 100 yards from the car. And suddenly he has 6 red laser dots on his chest. And it was in the afternoon, but he knew he had enough time to go hike it a ways and then come back out before it was dark. So it was probably like, let's say 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something. And he stopped, and he has 6 red dots on his chest. And he goes, okay, well, you guys, that means gun sight lasers.
Mm-hmm.
And he stops, and sure enough, guys come out behind bushes and rocks, camouflage, combat boots, clearly military, M16s pointed at him and said, halt, and they said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I got off work, and this is Long Canyon. It's one of my favorite hikes. I often come when I get off work. And they said, what are you doing here right now? He said, well, I just got off work, and I came to hike it. And they said, is that your car? And they knew the make, model, and his license plate of his car back at the trail. And he goes, yes. And they go, go back, get in your car and leave. And they said, you can come back tomorrow, but not today. He said, okay, but he was 6, he's like, okay, halt. You have 6 gun sight lasers on your chest, and he was actually relieved that they were military, not somebody else. But that kind of thing. We've interviewed people that if you give these guys lip service, or you wait till they leave and you think you're going to hike past them or get around them, you'll find yourself face planted in the ground, like breathing in dirt. So they'll say, in other words, they can rough you up a little. Only a few people have had that happen, but we do have accounts. So I could go on and on. We have tremendous evidence, like I said, ground penetrating radar, Freedom of Information Act. We have whistleblowers that have come out telling us about it. By the way, this base, as crazy as it sounds, but we have multiple insiders telling us it is ETs and humans working together at this base. Ranchers in the area have seen military on their property, ETs on their property, and military and ETs at the same time. We have multiple accounts of that.
So these military don't have stripes or flags. They're wearing blank uniforms.
Yeah, usually either people are noticing insignia and or are saying they don't have any insignia.
So that's an illegal.
Now, cars
Well,
coming back,
usually
you guys
if they're
technically.
camouflaged, the names don't stand out. They're olive drab background with black letters that, or maybe
most
even
people don't think to look. They're just saying, oh, they're military, and just making that assumption. Only a few people that we've interviewed looked and said they looked for anything and did not see any markings, expecting that they would have a number or a name or a flag on their shoulder, all the typical things. And they said, so we've had a few people comment they clearly did not have that.
So the operation's not authorized. What they're doing is illegal.
This underground base is very, very covert. And in it's like military aircraft have to have strobes on them unless they're in a military operation where they don't have to have the strobes. So military aircraft cannot have strobes given like wartime scenarios, or live fire operation, or whatever, depending on different things. And the reason is, they have to be in a secure airspace because other aircraft have to know that they're there, but so So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be illegal, but even in wartime scenarios, they're supposed to be marked. So, rules of engagement, who the enemy is and who friendly fire is, And so I don't know enough to know that, but we also do have. You mentioned before, we have a lot of evidence, multiple pieces of evidence showing Lockheed Martin's involvement with this facility, including some of the insiders said they actually work for Lockheed.
So I do have a question though. Is it the same tunnels that they say are also, I hear, are called the FEMA tunnels? Or are those separate?
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
What did you call it?
FEMA?
No.
That there's an association with FEMA.
Is that supposed to be in the area?
Yeah, I've heard that.
I've not heard
somewhere
that.
Out near the concrete plant, maybe.
No, that's not FEMA. That's the underground base.
Thing?
That
Okay.
we know is there.
Okay.
But I never finished saying. One of those 50-foot wide tunnels found on ground penetrating radar. You continue that line. I said it goes back to back end. One end goes to back end of both Sycamore and Secret Canyon. The other end goes right to a building at the back of the cement processing plant, which is below.
I've heard that.
It's in Clarkdale below Jerome there. And there's a building in the back of the property where over the years Tom Dongo interviewed guards who've worked there who say that and I it's kind of funny. Some of the people that work at the Denny's restaurant in Cottonwood, because they get guys from there, because guys who work there because they have security all night long and stuff. And one lady said, a friend of mine was dating a security guy. Anyways, long story short, but she said they'll come in there, and she said, so we've met a bunch of them, and they've asked them a few things and heard a few things there. And it was funny because they know what I do in the research, and a couple of the ladies there I've talked to, and they said, yeah, let's tell you what we've heard. So, and one of them works for a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin out there, and we already had, and she said, Lockheed Martin's involvement out there? I go, yeah, I have physical evidence in that we found documentation about their involvement out there, and their daily operations management at that facility. The land is owned by one company. It's an Indian tribe. It's leased out to another company, the Salt Creek, whatever. Okay. Maybe that's part of the Indian tribe. I forget exactly. But the management, the operations management is Martin Marietta Materials. Martin Marietta Materials is how Lockheed Martin got their name. Lockheed Aerospace bought Martin Marietta Materials. And I want to say it was like early 90s, if I remember. Anyways, but they bought them, and that's how they became Lockheed-Martin. Okay. Lockheed Martin Aerospace still owns 80% of Martin Marietta Materials, and we've done extensive research, and then NewsNation did additional research because I had documentation from 1998 that they owned 80%. Well, they came up with documentation from 2023. So new documentation, 2023 or even 2024, saying that
was a good one.
Lockheed Martin still owned 80% of Martin Marietta Materials. So if they're the management out there, then that tunnel entrance is managed by Martin Marietta Materials, which is Lockheed Martin. So, and we have documentation for that. Okay. So that puts them squarely involved. And so when the ladies who work at that Denny's say, hey, we know this guy that works for Martin Marietta Material, and he said they're owned by Lockheed Martin, I said, yeah, I know that. But I said, good, that's just another piece of evidence that this guy told you that. Okay. Going right. And they were like, oh, wow. And anyway, so now I take people out in the first, so enough evidence for the base. You guys can get it. You want to get out there, above and beyond. I took too long. Okay, so I take people out in the first 2 hours after sunset for a very specific reason. Even though it's now dark where we are, as soon as it got dark, there's a 2-hour window where even though it's dark here, everything in the upper atmosphere is still in bright sunlight. Mostly what we see is a metallic object reflecting sunlight, and you have an angle of sunlight coming over the horizon. That's all nighttime is the shadow of the planet. That's all it is, Earth's shadow. And as we rotate away from the sun, that shadow extends further out into space. And it actually kind of, as we're rotating this way, I say extends out, but it's been demonstrated to me repeatedly recently that it actually kind of sweeps across. And the other night at about this time, we had uh, um, the Starlink go over us in a new launch in a line of dots. I'll get more into that when I get to satellites. But they were very low on the horizon over here and at great distance. In fact, my clients were like, "What was that?" Because it looked like just a little tiny glowing line. And I actually had to turn on my goggles and look, and I said, "Oh, it is Starlink," but they're just way far away. And because they were headed in a direction that suggested it hadn't been a Vandenberg launch, but one of the other places they launched from is in Texas, and I said, "It's probably a Texas launch." I said, just based upon their angle, it's not the angle you would expect with Vandenberg at all. So, and I said, probably they launched maybe like earlier today or this morning in Texas. I guess I could have checked that, but it was really low in the sky. But what's interesting is we saw it go in to the darker edge of the shadow. And I said, any of my clients were like, "Oh, it just disappeared." And I said, well, in the goggles, you could see it enter the edge of the shadow, which meant that shadow had swept across and was over there. So I said, anything now within 20 minutes of that would be completely in shadow or even less. And I said, so anything from here on out above us is not catching angle of sunlight. And I was so glad that they saw that. It was demonstrated to them. That's the edge of the shadow. So then you go, wait, anything above us is fully in the shadow. In other words, isn't something reflecting sunlight because there's no angle of sunlight to hit it. That shadows covered the planet and it, as this, we rotate away from the sun at midnight. It's on the other side, and we're fully in that shadow. It's like a shaft extending out into space. And they can see the moon all night long because A, it's really big, and B, it's really far away. So it's catching sunlight. The moon doesn't glow. You only see the moon because it has silica glass-like stuff in its soil reflecting sunlight. And you can see that, okay, the sun's down over there. That's why you get that crescent moon, because that's the side facing the sun. I know you guys know how that works. So again, though, by showing them that lake, that's just last night. And I said, that means everything from here on out at that point was fully in the shadow. In other words, not reflecting sunlight, which rules out satellites. Satellites have no lighting on them. You only see satellites because they reflect sunlight. I said, the later it gets, you rule out satellites because there's no angle of sunlight, so you can't see them. Okay, moving right along. And I'll get more into that. So, but at least I said that much. I don't need to cover that again. Okay. So going back to, so we normally have the most sightings the first hour. The second hour would taper off with less and less sightings as we lose that angle of sunlight. But wait a second, Melinda, you said we're going to see the most stuff at 10:30 or 11. Well, that's because that stuff is self-luminous, meaning producing its own light, which satellites don't have and can't do. Again, that rules that out. But it also is a further piece of evidence that what we're seeing is unknown. You're seeing a field effect, plasma around the craft. I'll get more into that. Okay. Now, okay, so I covered about the angle of sunlight, why we normally would have more signs in the first hour, why it taper off in the second, and why it's significant that we're seeing stuff later, because therefore then none of that applies, suggesting, again, greater evidence that it's unknown. Okay. And then the other thing I always start with is to say, do not expect to see a structured craft. Structured craft, like taking one of our cars, trucks, SUVs, a motorhome, a cruise ship, a submarine, a locomotive, a Roman chariot, a fighter jet, a Lincoln Continental, a covered wagon, and I added this year, a lawnmower. Take anything I just said and float it in the sky right above us. If you guys hold up your goggles right now, even though it's a dark sky, but it's lit up by the moonlight and by starlight, and you hold up your goggles and you can see them silhouetted against the sky, right? You're seeing the structure, you're seeing the hard edges. You can see round parts and triangle parts and square parts and, okay. Or if my goggles are metal, I'm hitting metal chair, structured. So I always say, don't expect to see structured craft. Structured meaning seeing all the hard edges on something. We've seen full structure on 48 of the tours. Some of those tours were more than one structured thing. So sometimes there were 2 or 3 structured craft, structured ships, separate ships, but seeing all their hard edges. 2 or 3 in the sky at one time, or maybe there was one and 10 minutes later another, or an hour or 2 hours later, but on the same tour another. So it currently holds, and this is conservative, I've dialed this back, that we've seen 70 structure craft spread out between 48 tours. The last time we saw full structure was now about 3 months ago.
What did you see?
And we were at Culture Park, but facing these hills. It was a moonless night. Now the moon is going to set behind the hills probably in the next half hour, if not less. But we had a moonless night, so there was no moon, and it was really, really dark out. And it was about 9:45, and we started to hear whomp, whomp, whomp. What was a big military helicopter coming from this direction from the north. And just like here, we have this tree, this big bush right here. Well, we had a big tree or bush in about the same place. And I said, you guys coming from that direction. So we kind of got up and looked, and we heard it getting louder and louder. And they said, where is it? And I said, my guess is it's going to pop up right out of the canyon. Sure enough, at a secret canyon right here, popped right over the ridge. Boom, started coming towards us. And I'm like, did you guys just notice that pop right over the hill? And they go, oh yeah, like it clearly came up behind that mountain. I go, okay. And we could see its acquisition lights, which are the strobes. And as it came more towards us, it turned out it was a big Chinook helicopter. You guys, Chinooks are the big military helicopters with rotors on both ends, big transport helicopter. And so here's this big Chinook, rotors on both ends, coming towards us, whomp, 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 really loud. And I didn't have goggles right then. I had 10 people that night. I still had the 8 working pairs. And one of the clients goes, what's that in front of it? And I go, what's in front of it? And someone else goes, yeah, there's a big thing in front of it. And I go, what are you guys talking about? I just see the Chinook. And they said, and the lady right next to me said, here. She like abruptly handed me her goggles. She goes, look what the goggles are. Look. And I looked out, and oh my God. In front of it, silhouetted, so it was hard to see with my eyes because it was so dark. But in the goggles, you could clearly see in front of it was a great big disc that was bigger than the Chinook.
Cool.
And it was just silhouetted. And with the Chinook right behind it, it was hard to see. But as it started to come over us, it was very obvious, out in front of it. And the Chinook was falling right behind it. And in the goggles, the disc had a very slight glow to it. You see all the hard edge, slight glow, but the naked eye, you couldn't see that at all. These increased light by 50,000 times. And so here, what do you look at? That's
That thing hauling ass.
that's a jet.
Oh, it's really flying.
That's a military. No, I don't know. Hang on, I'm trying to see if it's triple blink.
One.
DDD. No, I think it's got maybe triple. Oh,
It has some speed and it's low, so it looks faster.
yeah. It's DDD. Let me see.
I mean, you can hear it.
DDD. I'm trying to see how many blinks. DDD.
And you can hear
I
it.
think it's got a double, but fast double can be small military. But yeah, you can hear him. It's very obvious. He's very fast. Could be a fast he's going due north. Could be going up to Flagstaff. A small private plane. Because commercial aircraft or some small military have a double blink.
Will we see zigzag patterns or?
We might.
abnormal?
We might. Nah, usually not. I'll get to that. We might. Okay, so moving right along. So I always say don't expect to see structure. Yes, we've seen on 48 tours about 70 structured craft. I dialed that back. That's a conservative number to say me 70 structured craft. I'll give you a quick breakdown of what we've seen when we've seen structure. So as I started to say that, the last thing we saw, which was a disc, was that Chinook following that disc. It came over us at arm's length. The Chinook was about 4 inches long at arm's length. And I had a pilot with us that night. And he said, he and I agreed that we thought it was probably about 1,000 feet above us. It was really low. Less than 2,000 feet for sure, probably about 1,000. And because the Chinook was that big, so that was very, very close. Look at that. That's probably realistic. And then the disc was bigger than the Chinook. All of a sudden, the disc jumped out in front, like 50 to 100 yards, just jumped out in front of it. And then he started to go up. The disc started to go up, 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 gaining in altitude and increasing speed the whole time, going faster, 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 until eventually streaked out like a bullet out of the atmosphere. So it went gone. Leaving the Chinook, womp, 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 womp. He continued south. My clients are, where's he going? And I explained to them, Luke Air Force Base to the south, right outside of Phoenix. He's probably going home. And it turned out the pilot guy had a friend with his, and then they told me later they were actually both pilots. They're both retired pilots. And they said to me later, we're packing up the chairs and the goggles in the cart then, and they go, oh, Melinda, we were talking amongst ourselves. That helicopter was not chasing that. It was like escorting it or giving it cover, probably till it could finally leave, go up. I said, I was thinking the same thing, that the Chinook was not in chase. I mean, first off, it's a Chinook. They don't come very fast, like womp, 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 womp. In fact, when they were over us, my clients were making jokes and saying, you guys are getting, meaning the military, they're saying, they're yelling at, you guys are going to need something better than that because you ain't going to catch up or chase that thing. And that Chinook, that ain't going to work, So people were being funny as we're seeing this. But the thing just suddenly, like I said, took off out of the atmosphere. And so that was, like I said, about 3, maybe 4 months ago. About 3 months. 3 months ago. So it was a really great sign. The last structure craft before that was a year before that. It actually happened April 2nd, not last year, but not this past year, but a year ago, April. And we had a triangle come from the west. And a black triangle came over us, followed by an F-16 fighter jet. And the triangle was barely moving, and it came over us, and the F-16 came in really fast and slowed way down, throttled back, pulled up right behind the triangle. They get right over here in the sky, and the triangle winked out. We were, again, out there, but we're looking the same direction. The triangle winked out, disappeared, leaving the jet flying by himself. He did a big arcing path, took off going south, and again, my clients were like, where's he going? I said, going to Luke Air Force Base. But as soon as that thing disappeared, he took off a different direction. And that was a triangle. It was a great one. Anyway, so going back to, here's a breakdown of what we've seen. So I just gave you an example of a triangle sign. That was the 10th tour we've seen big black triangles on. So we've had that on 10 tours. We've had discs, that's your classic flying saucer, round with a dome or structure on it, on 5 tours, and I just gave you the 5th one was the one that had happened. That's only happened 5 times on 2,025 tours, but we've seen discs. But that was the 5th time we'd seen a disc 3 months ago. Okay. We have had cylinders. That's your cigar ship. We've had that structure on 7 tours. We've had flat ovals, like pumpkin seed shape. We've seen that on 5 tours. We've had structural sphere. I'm not talking orbs. Orbs is a very real paranormal phenomena, seen in conjunction with every kind of paranormal activity. Anything from psychic readings and Reiki and energy healings to remote viewing and psychokinesis, Bigfoot investigation, ghost investigation, and UFO investigation. Doing anything paranormal, you're going to get orbs. It's believed to be consciousness or spirit emanating light, sometimes visible to the naked eye, sometimes picked up on film and camera. But you always have to be careful. You have to rule out all other possible explanations because there's a lot of camera artifacts that can produce that. So you got to rule those things out. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking structural sphere. Like take one of our cars, trucks, or even take a cruise ship and pack it in a ball. We've seen fully structural hard sphere on 5 tours. Then we've had boomerang shape. You guys all know what a boomerang looks like. We've seen that. Millions of those. Yeah, we've seen that on 6 tours. We've seen boomerangs. 2 of those tours were multiple boomerangs. One of those nights where we had multiple, I had years ago I would take out a few more than 10 people. I had 12 people that night, and including me, 13, and all 13 of us figured in under an hour we had seen at least 10 boomerangs.
Can I ask, was it like lit like the letter T, but the bottom of the T was at the 5
No,
o'clock?
this was, these were silhouetted, perfect boomerang.
Okay.
You know, like two pieces joined up like a boomerang. You know, like literally, like, and on my tour, and you guys might remember because you've done this with me years ago, I would have laser pointers. Now, two things are happening. One is I had lasers break, and I was going to get more, but we're seeing so much military helicopters. I realized it's 5 years in jail plus a $250,000 fine for lasering a plane or a helicopter. And I realized we're so close to these military helicopters, I can't have a bunch of people pointing out lasers.
Right.
So I decided not to buy a bunch more. Now, although recently I've thought maybe I'll still get one or even two or three, you know, or a couple in case some break. So I might get like 5 or something, because I might want to have them present. And if I have return clients who I really trust with their laser usage, or friends of mine with us and stuff, to have the lasers, because like that night we had the boomerangs, that time with the 10 boomerangs in under an hour, we were hitting them with the lasers, and the lasers were hitting them and reflecting off. Like right now, if I had one of my high-powered 500 milliwatt lasers and I hit my truck right now, my car, you'd see the laser hit the metal and bounce off at another angle, showing that it's hitting a reflective surface and bouncing off. We're hitting these with lasers, and the lasers were bouncing off. Other times we've had structured craft, we've hit them with the lasers, and lasers will both light them up and bounce off, and you get multiple lasers hitting them, and the lasers are bouncing all over the place. And what's significant about that? Well, you know you're hitting metal. You're clearly hitting metal. So that's, you're hitting a hard structured physical thing, the lasers are bouncing off. So it's really cool when it happens. So I thought, when we have structured craft, I need to have lasers. And occasionally for pointing out other stuff. But even myself, I'm very hesitant to laser out here because there'll be so many helicopters. And I don't want to. Why is it so illegal? Why is it 5 years in jail plus a $250,000 fine? Because you can blind the pilot. It's extremely dangerous. And so I don't want to blind the military guys out here. And I don't want them on my case either. So, but I'll get it, at least one and probably a couple for those times I do want to have them. I just can't hand them out to clients, because I recently had some clients bring their own lasers. I kept having to stop them because they kept lasering the military. And I said, you guys, no, we're being careful. I said, no, if you're not looking in the goggles right then and you're waving a laser, you've hit 10 military in the last 2 minutes. You got to be precision. And only one of them was being really careful. There's one guy that I said, you're being precision, you're being very careful. But still, the fact you're so near them, I don't need them complaining and giving me a bad time, calling the local police and having them give us a bad time.
They'd be useful below the ridge line if something's coming up.
Yeah, to hit the ridge and say, right there, something's coming up.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's a few other times when I do want to point at stuff. So I'm like, for me to use them, a few clients I trust or friends coming out who've done it, and when we get structured, because we want to flash at structure, we get stuff to flash back at us. A few return clients of mine have said, oh, we missed being able to flash at stuff. Well, if there's stuff above us and not out there with the military, I would say, yeah, we can flash at those. But even the other night with people that own their own lasers, I felt bad. I kept having to say, stop. I'm going to have to ask you guys not to use them anymore. I cannot
It's a big rose.
trust you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I say, you guys, I can't trust you. Man, how many times I've asked you, you keep it in the military. No, you can't wave them around. You just can't. And they thought they were being careful. They were trying to be careful, but they weren't. Okay, moving right along. Sorry. I know, I feel like I'm paranoid all the time. I'm just trying to, not be dangerous, be safe, not, do it legally, and make sure I'm doing everything right. Okay, moving right along. Okay, so I covered, just a quick breakdown, some other structured craft we've seen. One time we had a big V-shaped craft, like a capital letter V. One time we had a big horseshoe, like a U shape. 3 times we've had diamond, like diamond on a playing card, that shape. We've had a big teardrop shape twice. We've had disc, like I said, 5 times. Cylinder 7 times. triangles 10 times, big black triangles 10 times, and boomerangs 6 times. But then again, we've had, 6 tours. Like I said, diamond shaped 3 tours, and big teardrop, like a disc with a point on one side, on 2 tours. I think I covered everything. Structural sphere 5 times. I think I covered everything. Obviously, huge variety. Okay. Then occasionally we get a big bright light. My clients will be like, oh my God, when it's so close, so bright, what shape is it? What shape? And I'll say that shape is big light. Because light doesn't have a shape. No one laughed. That's like, well, is actually what I say, but it's also a joke because light doesn't have a shape. So, so if we get a big solid light moving, it still could very likely be a structured object. It's just up too high to see the structure, or it's too brightly lit up to see the structure. So I used to say we got structured. We got big light, like 1 in 5 tours. Now we're getting it every time. Often that light has a color. The most common color reported in UFO sightings is called amber light. That means anything gold, orange, or red. The second most common color reported is blue, and the third most common color reported is green. Well, you guys, we used to get amber light the first 13 years of doing my tours. We would get amber light 2 out of 3 tours. Did we have amber light when you guys went with me? Stuff that was gold, orange, or red? It used to happen about 2 out of 3 tours, and the most we'd ever seen it in one night was 6 times, and that held for 13 years. In the last year and a half, we're now getting amber every single night. And if we have it less than 30 times tonight, I'll be disappointed.
Oh, great. Wow.
Okay?
Amazing.
We will see amber light many times. That means anything gold, orange, or red. And I expect we'll see it. Now, normally by now, we've seen it once or twice, but I've not been looking that much. So if you guys see something moving, not blinking, point it out, and we'll look and see with our eyes. Now, you can only see color with your eyes. How the goggles work is they put out infrared. They're not heat intensifying, they're just light intensifying. But they increase light by about 50,000 times. What bounces back in your vision in the goggles will be green. So everything you can see is shades of green. It looks like gray, green, white, black. It's just light green, dark green, everything in between. You cannot see any color in the goggles. It's equivalent to seeing black and white film, black and white movie, black and white camera, except for it's black and green. Okay. So to see color, if something is really bright, and we call it a power-up, by the way, things that we're seeing move will suddenly get a lot brighter. We call it a power-up because it's purely a logical thing. They get brighter, and then they leave. Leave means they either wink out, disappear all at once, or they go dimmer, 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 and fade out. This is the most common thing we see, and we'll see it many, many times tonight. So if something suddenly is getting brighter, don't go, oh, it's getting brighter. I'll lower the goggles now, because by the time you lower it, the fact it's getting brighter, and the reason we call it a power up is they're powering up to leave. They immediately disappear. So if it's getting brighter, lower your goggles quick, because you want to see if you see the color with your eyes. You can't see any color in these, so it takes your own eyeballs to see color. By the way, structured craft on approach is usually a big orange, a red, or a blue or green light on approach. The most common color reported in sightings, like I said, amber light, is gold, orange, or red, anything in that spectrum. The second most common color reported is blue, and the third most common color reported is green. Now, I've taken out many physicists on this tour and a few plasma physicists. Your phone is still on over there, and I'm worried you're going to have a dead battery.
That's the watch, but it is
Oh,
bright
it's the
in my
watch.
eye.
Oh, okay. If you have a way to shut that off, because that will create glare for the goggles, and you risk damaging
I think
the
it's when I
goggles.
move my arm.
Yeah. Well, maybe
Yes.
put it in a pocket or something. So.
If I move mine up, it comes on too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem with the goggles. So if you have a way to shut it off, or
I'll
you
stick it
can
on my purse.
put it away for a moment. Yeah. I'm just saying, because it'll create glare with the goggles. And I'm worried about if you're holding your goggles and the watch is like inches away from it, it could damage it. Yeah, no problem then. Okay, what gets me is through the goggles, because they see in the infrared. They're increasing light using infrared. They send out an infrared beam. As I'll see, people will say your pocket is flashing, or or if you have a Bluetooth on your ear, it's flashing. And what that means is picking up the infrared, which means you're getting nuked. Like men will go, oh, I carry my cell phone in your pocket. Mistake. because you're nuking everything that is near that pocket, and you end up with things like prostate cancer. So, it's not good to carry your cell phone in your pocket all the time. And people stopped wearing. You know how people don't wear Bluetooth on their ear all the time now is because, right, they learned people are getting brain cancer from them. And with the goggles, you see these things. You see the signal they're giving off. And you go, you want to see how you're getting nuked? Not good. The infrared signal is pretty powerful. Hell, I put mine on my nightstand near my bed at night, and I always think, like, is it too close to me? Some people say it shouldn't be in your room where you're sleeping, but I need it in the morning because I start getting calls and texts about appointments and stuff. So I'm like, I gotta have it. Oh, you guys are fine. Yeah, no problem. Have fun. Not bugging us at all. Okay, so going back to okay, so yeah, I'll get back to that in a minute. Okay, so I covered, where am I? Okay, I covered the various structure. Oh, big light. I'm sorry, that's where I left off. So it just means it's a little too high up to see the structure, or it's too brightly lit to see the structure. And I started to say about the colors. I've taken out physicists and plasma physicists. It was mostly the plasma physicists I got the most detail. They said in the lab, they create a highly charged energy field, so like electrical field, so massively charged, it'll ionize the air around it. That ionization is called electrical plasma. They know they've achieved plasma when they get amber light. Like my understanding is you get gold, the more power it goes orange, the more power it goes red. Then they tell me it's like 50 times more power. It'll shift to a different type of plasma. Excuse me, something I ate today. A different type of plasma. And then you get blue. And after the blue, about 50 times more energy again. It becomes another type of plasma. And then you get the green. Well, you guys, we used to get amber light 2 out of 3 tours, like you heard me say. Now we're getting it every night, and I expect we'll see it at least 30 times, probably 50 to 100. We'll see amber light a lot. It used to be a rare thing. Now it's every tour. So this is in the last year and a half, part of this new stuff. The amount of military out over these hills never used to happen. Boom, that's been happening for a year and a half. Amber lights, 2 out of 3 tours. Most we'd ever seen was 6. Now it's happening 50 times or more.
And that all's a craft. Each amber light?
Plasma. It means something is generating a huge amount of energy to ionize the air around it. Yes, it's a ship or a craft. But I'm going to quote engineers and physicists on my tour. They say it means it's bleeding out an obscene amount of energy. That's the absolute quote I've had from many people. An obscene amount of energy. It's an unimaginable amount of energy.
And stars don't do that.
Miles away or hundreds of thousands of feet away, we would see the plasma, the ionization.
And stars don't do that, right?
Stars are giant plasma fireballs. The closest ones are 1.2 million light years away.
Yeah, I still don't know what the difference is.
We're talking things in our atmosphere. So stars are 1.2 million light years away. We're talking about things that are 5 miles away from us that are a structured craft generating a huge amount of energy, and we're seeing a plasma field around the craft. Do you understand now? Okay. I'm just trying to make sure you guys get it. So you're seeing it just, again, quoting aerospace engineers and physicists on my tour, is it's an obscene amount of energy. It's bleeding out such a huge electrical signature, so much energy that it's ionizing the air around it. So what you're seeing is not any lighting or anything. You're seeing ionized air that's glowing. And in a lab, as soon as they've achieved ionization, they get amber light. So that's what it means when we get the amber, gold, orange, or red, you're seeing ionization. In fact, red is more plasma than the orange, but to the naked eye, the focal length of red is shorter, so the orange will look brighter. But notice after they go, as soon as they get bigger and powered up, lower your goggles, because if you wait, it'll disappear, and then you'll see the amber. And then when they dim, you might see the red for a minute, or you might see red for a second, then they get brighter and go to orange. The truth is the red is more power. It's just the orange, to the naked eye, the focal length of orange is brighter. So you're going to see the orange, orange or yellow will be brighter than red, even though the red is more energy, if that makes sense. Okay. And that means you're seeing ionization of the air. Well, there's nothing on a plane or okay, first off, The only reason you see satellites are a metal object reflecting sunlight. They have no lighting on them. I will get more into that when I get to satellites next, or coming up in just a couple minutes. I'll be into satellites. So, but you can only see them because they're metal reflecting sunlight. Planes and helicopters, if you ever had ionization or plasma around a plane or helicopter, you would no longer have a plane or helicopter, would instantly ignite the fuel and blow up. In fact, planes run a counter charge through the skin of the plane, whether that's a fighter jet or commercial aircraft, whatever. They run a counter charge so they don't ever risk building up plasma. Because if you went through an electrical storm or something and they build up plasma, it would ignite the fuel and blow up. So it's a really good thing for safety measures. They run a counter charge to make sure that won't happen. And then satellites, if you ever had ionization around a satellite, you'd no longer have a satellite. It would fry every circuit on board, and you'd have a burnt out, charred out piece of metal. So there's nothing on those things that can produce that obscene amount of energy. They say it's an unimaginable amount of energy that it, hundreds of thousands of feet, let alone miles away, that we would be seeing. And yet we do see it all the time. Okay. Now, structured craft on approach is usually a big orange or red or blue or green light on approach. If you guys go, Melinda, what's that big blue light? What's that big green light coming towards us? You guys will see Melinda lose it. Nobody laughed when I said Melinda will lose it, because what that means is you're seeing. I'm trying to be funny. I'm playing to a hard audience tonight, guys. Sometimes everybody laughs, and tonight nobody. Okay, that's right. But that means you're seeing a structured craft come towards us. And how do you know? Well, it's a giant plasma field of blue or green, which means something is bleeding an unimaginable amount of energy. And as it starts to come towards us, someone starts to go, oh my God, it's a triangle. Oh my God, it's a cylinder. Oh my God, it's a disc, depending on what shape they're seeing. And sometimes I see the shape first, but a lot of times it's my clients. That night we had that triangle come over. It was a giant amber light on approach. And again, I had a retired pilot that night. And he goes, Melinda, that's a black triangle. And I was turning because the lady next to me asked me a question. And I was talking to her. And when he said, that's a triangle, and one of my other clients said, yeah, that's a triangle, I then looked back and I go, oh my God, you're right. And for just that split second, it went from being a big amber line on approach to being right over us. And then you could see the hard edge triangle shape, which was a black triangle emanating this plasma field effect. It's a field effect. It's an ionization around the craft. I know you guys get it now. Okay, so we will see that tonight. It means something is, when every time we see it, know that means an object, a structured craft probably is bleeding all that energy, but it's too far away to see the structure or too brightly lit to see it. Structured craft is right over you, and it's usually really close or really, really big, and it's usually both. Having had said that, we've seen full structure, all the hard edges, 70 times. 48 tours, but over 70 separate objects. Okay, now, then sometimes we get things in formation. And you guys know, we're getting amber light, like I said, usually over 30 times every night. We've only seen blue 6 times last year and a half. So know how rare that is, that much energy to be creating the blue. So we've only seen that 6 times. And it was already an amber light that suddenly powered up, got really bright, and went to blue. Okay. We've only seen green twice in the last year and a half. Now, we've seen green prior. So we've seen green a total, including the last 2, a total of 17 tours we've seen green. But that's 17 out of 2,025 tours. 17 times. We've seen blue on maybe 50 tours total. And 6 of those were in the last year and a half. Probably about 50 tours total. Maybe, yeah, that's about right. Maybe over 50, maybe up to 75 tours, maybe total that we've seen blue. Amber light used to be 2 out of 3 tours. Now we're getting it every tour. Used to happen. We were lucky if we saw it 2 or 3 times a night. That would have been a big deal years ago. Now, I'm disappointed if it's not 30 times. Okay. Now, then we see formations. You guys, formations means more than one thing traveling together in unison, same speed, same direction, actually hanging out together. Okay. Doubles, two things traveling together. Used to happen 2 out of 3 tours. Now it's happening every tour. I expect we'll have it happen at least 10 times tonight, doubles. 3 things in a triangle formation used to happen 1 in 10 tours. Is everything okay?
Yeah, I just got to call my parole officer.
Seriously?
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's
Just-
so nice he was able to get out for the.
Okay, now this next part I need you to hear, so it's a really bad time to be walking away.
All right, I'm here.
Okay. You got to use the restroom or something?
Yeah, and other things.
Oh.
Make a phone call, but go ahead.
Okay, can you wait till we start looking with the goggles? Because I'm within 5 minutes of turning the goggles on.
Okay.
So if you can wait to make your phone call, because I want you to have signs right away. You know.
Right on.
Okay. So give me about 5 minutes to finish this. So okay. So triples, 3 things in triangle formation, used to happen 1 in 10 tours. I'd even gone 2 years without seeing 3 in formation. Now we're getting it every night, and I expect we'll see it 5 times at least tonight. Okay, it's 3 things in triangle formation. 4 or 5 things flying together in a group, in a formation, used to be very rare. You know, it happened on a total of 50 tours total over the years until the last couple of months, because that's one thing even in the last year and a half of new stuff. This year, in the last 5 months, the amount of formations we're getting has greatly increased. We're now to get anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5, up to about 8 things flying in a group together is now common. I expect we'll get 4 and 5 in formation multiple times tonight, and we could get up to 6, 7, or 8.
Do you think the activity here is similar to the activity around the world, or is there something
No, this is something
special?
off the base here that we're seeing the stuff
Okay.
come and go, and the amount of activity and the amount of military.
Okay.
Something's going on.
Okay.
This base is known to have ETs and humans working together. So this could be ETs coming and going for some reason in huge. I mean, you guys are going to see a lot of stuff. You're not prepared for how much stuff you're going to see, and you're going to be like, "What the hell is happening?" Okay, and I don't know. You know, all I know is what we're seeing. Okay. And then the other thing is, so we're going to see a lot, and on top of that, you're going to see a lot of military. You may see, like he was saying, the military escort them. Some nights they're not really doing that, and some nights they are, but don't be surprised if it looks like the helicopters are right there with the objects. I just know when suddenly the helicopters start coming in and increasing, that means something crazy is about to go down. And last night, right before 11, like Core 2, they suddenly increased, and we started to have all these things pop up behind the hills. So maybe that'll happen again tonight. Okay. What the military are doing, according to experts I take out, is they're securing airspace. They're making sure no one uninvited is flying into these canyons. They're securing airspace. And there'll be at any given moment, there'll be at least 10 of them, and some nights we count up to 30 helicopters at a time. Not in the 2-hour window viewing, at one time.
How late? So if it's up, I'm sorry, I really have a question about time. So are we...
That's why I said give me about 5 more minutes. We'll be viewing. I'm on track for rounding this up. Now, okay, so I talked about formations. You guys get it. Okay. How do you know you're seeing a UFO? UFO, of course, is unidentified flying object. The only way to know you have an unknown object, I already said this tonight, it's worth repeating, is you got to rule out all the known things first. Only when you can rule out all the knowns do you have an unknown. We are getting official disclosure from the U.S. government. You heard me say UFO. Does someone here know the new term to replace UFO? UAP, you're right. And what does UAP stand for?
Unidentified aerial phenomena.
And one other thing, do you know what the A also stands for?
Anomalous.
Very good. Very few people know that. That's very good. I mean, on my tours, it's 1 in 50 people, but that's good. That's very good to know. Okay. So the government's new term to replace UFO to get away from the negative stigma and the ridicule. We had 2 public hearings on the subject last year. We were supposed to have one already this year. It's now been pushed back to September. We're going to have a public congressional hearing in September on the subject with multiple whistleblowers. Have you heard that in September?
They're all government employees.
I mean,
Yeah.